the hidden power you were never taught? What if the very traits that made you a good man were the same ones that kept you weak? What if kindness was turned against you? If your honesty made you predictable? If your loyalty made you easy to manipulate? And what if those who moved past you in power, in attraction, in influence, weren't more worthy or even more intelligent, but simply less naive? You were raised to believe that being strong meant being righteous, that the good guys win, that truth always rises, that if you just stay authentic, patient, open, things will fall into place. But look around. Has that worked? For you? For the men around you? For those who keep doing everything right and still feel like something is missing? In this video, we begin a different path. Not the loud path. Not the get-rich-quick path. Not the fake dominance path. But the ancient one. The cold one. The strategic one. The one that understands what Niccolo Machiavelli saw clearly over 500 years ago. Men should be either treated kindly or destroyed, because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries, but not of more serious ones. This isn't about becoming evil. It's about becoming effective. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Because you're not here to be nice. You're here to see clearly, and then choose from power. No one ever taught you this. Because the world is afraid of men who understand it. You were taught rules, but not dynamics. You were taught how to behave, but not how people actually think, feel, and move in power. You were taught to be polite, patient, and pleasing, because those traits make you controllable. And a man who is easy to control is easier to keep quiet. Machiavelli wasn't a tyrant. He was an observer. Of kings, of war, of politics, of seduction, of the real human condition, not the moral one. He didn't write The Prince to turn men into monsters. He wrote it to expose what's already happening behind the curtain, so you can stop being the one who's always on the outside asking, why did this happen again? It happened because you were playing by rules meant to keep you blind. Let's start with the first truth. People don't respond to honesty. They respond to perception, to positioning, to power, subtle, emotional, psychological. If you're honest but sloppy, you're dismissed. If you're kind but insecure, you're ignored. If you're loyal but afraid to confront, you'll be surrounded by people who use your strength against you. Machiavelli didn't say be cruel. He said, understand cruelty. Understand what moves people. Understand that fear, admiration, and emotional leverage shape behavior more than logic ever will. You were trained to think manipulation is evil, but you were manipulated into thinking that. From school, from family, from media. They told you not to lie while lying to you. Told you to be strong while punishing your fire. Told you to be yourself while shaping who yourself should be. That's the first manipulation, and it's deep. But here's the pivot. You don't need to become the villain. You just need to stop pretending the game isn't being played. Power is not about control. It's about awareness. About seeing what's actually happening beneath the surface and choosing your move from center. You've been reacting, waiting to be chosen, trying to be enough, living on approval. That ends here. Now we shift. This series isn't a blueprint. It's a lens, a way of seeing that will change how you move in conversations, handle tension, build presence, understand women, read people, influence outcomes, and most of all, reclaim your own mind, because your mind isn't weak. It's just been trained to obey. Now it begins to observe. You'll learn the difference between being trusted and being used, being liked, and being respected, being open, and being leverageable, being sincere, and being strategically silent, being the good man, and being the man who gets chosen not because you'll fake it, but because you'll know when to act and when to hold your cards. Machiavelli wrote for men who were ready to rule, not with iron fists, but with iron clarity. The men who change things aren't always loud. They don't always look like leaders. They don't wear crowns, but they move rooms. They move women. They move energy. They understand timing, not just truth. They understand emotion, not just logic. They understand people, and that's what makes them powerful. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming precise. You'll still have heart. You'll still love. You'll still stand for what matters. But you'll stop offering yourself to people who haven't earned your presence. You'll stop apologizing for knowing what you want. You'll stop explaining yourself to people who trade in confusion. You'll stop bleeding energy into dynamics that never respected it in the first place. This is the art of manipulation, not as deceit, but as awareness in motion. And in a world built on influence, the man who ignores it gets played by it. You won't be that man anymore. Why morality makes men weak. We go deeper. You'll see how your attachment to being good has blinded you to the power you already have. Why morality makes men weak. You were told to be good, to be kind, to be fair, to do the right thing, even when no one's watching. You were told that if you followed the rules, if you were honest, humble, helpful, you'd be respected. You'd be safe. You'd be loved. But they left something out, didn't they? They didn't tell you that people respect what they fear losing, not what they pity. They didn't tell you that being moral in a world that trades in strategy makes you a target, not a leader. They didn't tell you that the men who shaped history were rarely good in the way you were trained to be. They were decisive, cold when necessary, sharp, and willing to do what others wouldn't. Carl Jung said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." And men who cling to morality without understanding power end up blind to their own shadow. They think they're being noble, but they're just being naive. They think they're doing the right thing, but they're handing the steering wheel of their life to anyone who knows how to use guilt as a leash. Let's be clear, morality is not weakness. But unconscious morality, the kind you inherited without ever testing, is. Because it's not based on vision. It's based on fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of being alone. Fear of stepping out of the good guy frame and into your full clarity. You were taught that being moral means never hurting anyone. But you were never taught how much it hurts to abandon yourself. You were taught that forgiveness is divine. But you were never taught how quickly forgiveness becomes permission for others to violate your boundaries. You were taught to be patient. But you were never taught that people take from those who wait forever. You were taught that vulnerability is strength. But no one taught you how often vulnerability gets weaponized by those who sense your open chest, but bring no shield of their own. Machiavelli didn't say, "Don't be moral." He said, "Be moral only when it serves your purpose." Not because you're manipulative, because you're awake. And when you're awake, you stop being controlled by the illusion that doing the right thing is always the right move. There are moments when truth must be withheld. Moments when silence protects more than honesty ever could. Moments when loyalty is weakness. Moments when kindness is complicity. Moments when your desire to be good lets people cross lines that were never meant to be crossed. And if you don't know how to recognize those moments, you'll keep playing a game you were never meant to win. Here's what morality has done to men like you. It's turned your strength into softness, your patience into passivity, your openness into exposure, your discipline into silence. And the world doesn't reward that. It consumes it. This doesn't mean you become cruel. It means you stop being available to those who use your values against you. You stop folding every time someone says, "I thought you were better than that." You stop explaining yourself to people who only hear what makes them comfortable. You stop holding back when your full presence is what the moment demands. You stop apologizing for having standards, pace, and direction. The man who understands this doesn't become less moral. He becomes morally sovereign. He chooses when to forgive and when to walk. He chooses when to reveal and when to observe. He chooses when to lead and when to disappear. He is not led by fear of perception. He is guided by internal law. When you live by that kind of morality, people feel it. They don't just like you. They trust you because they know you are not performing goodness. You are embodying authority. And authority isn't granted. It's built. Every time you choose what is right for you over what is pleasing to others, you build it. This is why most men stay stuck in the good guy role. Because they think it's noble to sacrifice truth for harmony. But harmony without truth is just a lie in a nice tone. You've lived long enough in that space, where everyone's comfortable except you. That ends now. You will still be good, but no longer obedient. You will still love, but no longer from lack. You will still serve, but not from a place of needing approval. Because now, your morality isn't borrowed. It's chosen. And when you choose it, you become untouchable. You're not shaken by their guilt, not seduced by their praise, not moved by the flinch in their voice when you speak with weight. You are rooted. Because your compass is internal now, and men with internal compasses don't collapse in chaos. They direct it. That's what Machiavelli understood. He didn't ask men to abandon their soul. He asked them to stop selling it in exchange for a clean reputation. And now, so do you. Because your reputation will change. Some will call you distant, harsh, not like before. Let them, because the man they remember was dying to be liked. This one, he's living, finally, for something real. Control or be controlled. You'll see how every interaction is a matter of influence. Every room you enter, a negotiation of power. There is no neutral ground. Every room you enter, Every glance, every silence, every choice you delay, it's all negotiation, all leverage, all movement of control. The question is never, is there power here? The question is always, who has it? You were raised to believe that control is wrong, that trying to direct anything, a situation, a person, an outcome, makes you manipulative, that real men are calm, patient, surrendering, that leadership happens naturally, that if you just stay grounded and wait, the world will organize itself around your clarity. It won't, because someone else in that room is already moving the pieces, already reading you, already setting the frame you think you're choosing inside of. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And one of the most common avoidance strategies is to pretend you're above control, to act like you don't care who makes the call, to say, whatever works for you, to give away decision, direction, frame, and call it openness. But it's not openness, it's self-erasure. Here's the truth, you are always in one of two positions. You are either shaping or being shaped. You are either influencing or being influenced. You are either leading the energy or reacting to it. There is no third option. And the more you deny that, the more predictable, bendable, and controllable you become. Not because you're weak, but because you've refused to admit that control is already in the room. Let's define control clearly. Control is not dominance, not aggression, not force. Control is presence. It's the ability to hold your frame so consistently, so calmly, so sharply that everything around it begins to orbit you or bounce off you. You don't chase. You don't explain. You don't overpower. You simply direct. With your tone, with your stillness, with your silence, with your choice. Machiavelli understood this. He didn't glorify power for its own sake. He simply knew that in any human system, someone would lead, and if you weren't willing to, you'd spend your life following the ones who were. And most of them weren't more righteous, weren't more qualified, just less afraid to be seen as decisive. Look around your life. Where are you being controlled? In conversations where you smile but don't agree, in dynamics where you wait for approval before moving, in moments when you censor yourself because someone might feel some type of way, in relationships where your decisions are based on minimizing discomfort, not expressing truth. You've been taught that this is maturity. It's not. It's a subtle, consistent surrender of your center. And the people who keep pulling it from you, they're not even villains. They're just used to a version of you that hasn't yet taken the wheel. The man who claims control doesn't grab it. He allows it. He lets people feel his direction before he even speaks. He doesn't posture. He doesn't rush. He doesn't justify his pace. He walks in with presence, and that presence becomes the axis. Others move around him, adjust to him, question themselves before questioning him. Not because he's loud, because he's centered. This isn't about micromanaging. It's about owning your energy. And energy is always sending signals. Your posture, your eye contact, your tone, your timing, your no, your yes, your stillness in the face of chaos. It all says something. And when you don't claim control over your own signal, others will define it for you. Control starts with self-regulation. A man who can't hold his emotion will always be controlled by someone who can. A man who flinches at disapproval will always bend to the louder voice. A man who doesn't know what he wants will always serve someone who does. You don't have to dominate, but you do have to decide. That's where it begins. Decide what you will and will not tolerate. Decide how you spend your time. Decide the tone of your spaces. Decide how people access you. And how often. Decide when to speak, when to watch, when to act, and when to disappear, not from emotion, from inner command. This is what makes people stop trying to control you. They realize it doesn't work anymore. And yes, some will be upset, because your softness made them feel powerful, because your lack of control made space for their control, because your old self was easier to shape. But this isn't about them. It's about the moment you look in the mirror and know, I'm the one steering this now. I'm not here to be pushed around by every wave, every opinion, every expectation. And when that's real, you move differently. You no longer negotiate under pressure. You no longer fill silences you didn't create. You no longer ask people to make space for you. You take space calmly. And if someone's energy tries to shape yours, you don't resist it. You let it bounce off, because your field is no longer reactive. It's directive. This is control. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet authority. Built one clear yes at a time. Built one unapologetic no at a time. built one moment of stillness in a world addicted to chaos. The Machiavellian mirror. You'll see how your fear of being manipulative has kept you from accessing your actual influence. You say you hate manipulation, that you can't stand people who lie, twist, scheme. You pride yourself on being real, honest, authentic. But here's the question, are you really? Or are you just afraid to admit how often you manipulate in silence? Not out of malice, out of fear, out of survival, out of a belief that if you show your full hand, you'll lose. The Machiavellian isn't just someone out there. He's in you, watching, waiting, operating quietly under every interaction where you don't say what you mean, but expect to be understood anyway. When you withhold your truth to protect someone's feelings, that's influence. When you avoid direct conflict to keep the peace, that's control. When you stay silent hoping someone reads between the lines, that's manipulation. And when you pretend you're above all that, you become most dangerous to yourself. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The darkness isn't evil. It's the part of you you've disowned. And for most men, that part includes the willingness to play the game. Not to deceive, to direct, not to exploit, to move outcomes with intention. But most men can't face that side, so they bury it, and then they wonder why nothing in their life bends when they speak. Here's what you don't want to admit. You've wanted control. You've wanted influence. You've wanted to shape how people see you, feel you, respond to you. And when you didn't know how to do it cleanly, you did it covertly. Through passivity, through guilt, through withdrawal, through silence, through politeness. And then, you called that being good. But it wasn't goodness. It was fear, wrapped in language that kept you blameless. Machiavelli would say, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." And if you've spent your life trying to appear good, fair, honest, you've likely stopped being real. Because you made peace with being misunderstood as long as people still liked you. That's not virtue. That's self-abandonment. This is the mirror. You are not what you've performed. You are what you've avoided showing. And most men avoid showing power because they've only seen it used for harm. They don't want to be the aggressor, the narcissist, the manipulator. So they swing the other way. They become harmless. And then wonder why no one listens when they speak. Why women don't feel them. Why they're skipped over, talked over, looked through. It's not because they're too nice. It's because they've exiled their force. You don't need to become the villain. But you do need to stop pretending that your unwillingness to play the game makes you morally superior. It doesn't. It makes you ineffective. And effectiveness in love, leadership, or life is not about being impressive. It's about being honest with your shadow. What have you denied in yourself? The desire to win, the need to be seen, the instinct to influence, the strategic mind that scans a room and sees exactly where to push. You've called these things dangerous. But they're only dangerous when ignored. Because when you don't integrate them, they leak. In sarcasm, in self-sabotage, in half-truths, in resentment, in passive aggression. You think you're clean, but your shadow is moving pieces while you sleep. This is the Machiavellian mirror. It doesn't ask, "Are you a good man?" It asks, "Can you look yourself in the eye knowing exactly how much power you hold and not flinch?" Because once you admit you have it, you have to own it. You have to stop pretending you don't know what your words do. You have to stop playing confused when your silence cuts. You have to stop hiding behind being misunderstood when you've been shaping the outcome all along. And once you do that, you get clean. Your influence becomes conscious. Your presence becomes focused. Your decisions stop leaking uncertainty. Your interactions carry edge, without apology. You stop manipulating by accident and start influencing with integrity. That's real power. Not the kind that needs to be seen. The kind that's felt by anyone who enters your field. From that place, you don't pretend to be above the game. You understand it. You play it with clarity. Sometimes that means silence. Sometimes that means precision. Sometimes it means walking away, not to punish, but because you know when the table no longer matches your value. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to deceive. You just need to stop apologizing for knowing how things work and using that knowledge to choose your direction. Here's the paradox. The men who integrate their Machiavellian side are the least dangerous. Because they don't need to hide. They don't need to twist. They don't need to lie. They don't need to manipulate through shame or confusion. They're clear, sharp, rooted, and deeply, deeply calm. Because they are no longer afraid of who they are when no one's watching. You've been taught to fear that version of you. To soften him. to tame him, to keep him hidden behind smiles and respectfulness. But that version of you, the one who sees, who calculates, who moves with intent, he is not your enemy. He is your edge. And without it, you're just another man waiting to be told who to be. Let this be the chapter where you stop flinching at your reflection, where you stop saying, "I would never," and start asking, "What would it mean if I could?" Not because you will, but because you're finally strong enough to hold the possibility. That's what maturity is. Not purity, not perfection, but presence, even in your own shadow. Masks, roles, and perception. How people see you, how you see yourself, and how perception, not truth, is what shapes every outcome. You think people see you. They don't. They see your mask. They see the role you play, the signals you send, the emotional tone you broadcast. They don't see your soul. They don't know your heart. They don't care about your intentions. They react to how you appear, not to who you are. You were taught that being authentic is enough. That if you stay true to yourself, people will somehow just understand. But here's what you learn the hard way: they don't. Because most people are not looking for your essence. They're looking for a mirror of their own needs, their own fears, their own stories. And if your presence doesn't fit their lens, they'll twist you, shrink you, dismiss you. Not because you're wrong, because you didn't control the frame. Carl Jung said, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." And Machiavelli, in his own way, understood the same truth. Perception is power. If you don't shape it consciously, it shapes you. The question is not, am I being authentic enough? The question is, am I projecting an image that matches my actual intention? If the answer is no, you're not being real. You're being invisible, because reality doesn't move based on truth alone. It moves based on perceived reality. Think about it. You've said honest things and been doubted. You've shown loyalty and been discarded. You've been sincere and still lost influence. Why? Because honesty without projection is just noise to most people. They need structure, emotion, frame. They need to feel something before they believe anything. This is why Machiavelli said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." It's not cynical. It's sober. And the sooner you stop expecting people to magically get you, the sooner you can start guiding what they feel. Not by lying, not by faking, by learning how to carry your role. Every man wears masks. Not to deceive, to transmit. You wear a mask when you lead a room. You wear a mask when you enter a negotiation. You wear a mask when you comfort someone. You wear a mask when you set a boundary. Masks aren't the problem. Unconscious masks are. Masks you didn't choose. Masks that serve someone else's approval. Masks that shrink you just enough to stay acceptable. Those are the masks that kill men. The man who understands this doesn't stop being real. He starts being intentional. He asks, what am I signaling right now? What emotion am I leading with? What frame am I setting before I even speak? Because in every interaction, someone is setting the frame. It's either you or them. And if you're not doing it consciously, you're doing it desperately. Look back at your life. How often did you perform a role you didn't even know you were playing? The nice guy, the smart one, the good listener, the reliable friend, the forgiving son. Roles that kept the peace. Roles that made you acceptable. Roles that helped you survive, but stole your actual presence. Because you weren't living. You were managing perception without knowing it. Now, you do it awake. You wear masks by choice. You choose roles with clarity. You project presence with intention. And because of that, you stop leaking energy trying to be everything to everyone. You become singular, focused, undeniable. Not because you're louder, because you're clearer. This is the shift. Stop performing for acceptance. Start directing for influence. Not to control others, but to stop being controlled by their misunderstanding. You lead with weight in your voice, precision in your words, a gravity in your pauses, clean edges on your boundaries. You stop explaining the deep parts of you to people who never earned the right to see them. You stop handing your essence over to be misinterpreted and mishandled. You carry it, steady, silent, sharp. From here, life changes. Women feel you differently. They sense depth without you oversharing. Opportunities come differently. People trust you without knowing exactly why. Conflict feels different. You no longer flinch when misread. You stand in your own broadcast and let clarity sort the field for you. Not everyone will stay. Good. You're not here to be universally loved. You're here to be undeniably yourself. Machiavelli wasn't telling you to be fake. He was telling you to stop being naive. People don't care who you are. They care how you make them feel. They care about what you signal to their nervous system. And when you know that, you stop feeling betrayed when truth alone isn't enough. You adjust, not your soul, your presentation. You are both the man behind the mask and the man who chooses which mask the world sees. That's not deception. That's sovereignty. You move between roles with elegance, not because you're lost, but because you're free. You no longer beg to be seen. You reveal only what you choose only when you choose only to who has earned it. The seduction of influence. You were taught to push, to assert, to convince, to explain. That if you wanted people to move, you had to make them, with arguments, pressure, logic, effort. But here's the truth. The most powerful form of influence is never loud, never direct, never needy. It's not about control. It's about atmosphere. There's a kind of presence that changes the room before a single word is spoken. You've felt it before. Someone enters. They're calm, still, not trying to prove anything, not scanning for attention, just there fully, unapologetically. And suddenly you feel it. Their weight, their field, their clarity. That's influence. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He knew that power moves through perception, and perception is shaped by emotion. Not facts, not arguments, not even truth. Emotion. You want to lead? Learn to move emotion. You want to attract? Learn to shape what people feel in your presence. Because people don't remember what you say. They remember how you made them feel without saying anything. That's the seduction of influence. It's not manipulation. It's direction through energy. When your nervous system is regulated, you regulate others. When you don't seek approval, people feel pulled toward you. When your speech has space, your words gain weight. You don't need to overpower. You don't need to chase. You just hold. And that holding becomes gravity. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." That's what influence does. It transforms. Not through effort, through frequency. You stop fighting to be understood. You start becoming undeniable. Because when your signal is clean, it cuts through noise. You don't need to sell yourself. You need to be rooted in your own value so deeply that others feel it in their bones. You don't need to raise your voice. You need to master the weight of your silence. You don't need to be impressive. You need to be authentic with edge. That edge is what sharpens the connection. That edge is what creates movement. Look at the men who hold influence. Not the loudest ones, not the wealthiest, the clearest, the stillest, the ones who speak rarely, but when they do, everything stops. Why? Because they don't scatter energy. They direct it. They don't try to be magnetic. They become magnetic by owning every inch of their internal field. That's what people feel. That's what they follow. This is how seduction works. Not just sexual, social, psychological, strategic. You create a field that makes people feel safe, seen, and slightly challenged. That tension pulls them closer. That calm keeps them open. That edge keeps them alert. It's not a performance. It's a frequency. And it's built through the disciplines no one sees. You slow your movements. You breathe with intention. You drop filler words. You look without scanning. You speak from your chest, not your throat. You sit in silence without fidgeting. You become the still point in a room full of static. And the world begins to organize itself around you. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped fighting and started holding signal. Here's what changes when you lead with influence. Women feel your depth before you say anything. People assume leadership before you take it. Rooms open up because your presence stabilizes them. Tension bends toward you. Not away, chaos slows down in your presence. Not out of fear, but recognition you are no longer one of many. You are the axis. Machiavelli didn't want men to become tyrants. He wanted them to wake up, to stop asking, "How do I convince people?" and start asking, "What do they feel when I enter?" Because if the answer is nothing, you are invisible. And invisibility kills kings long before war does. Influence isn't about volume. It's about vibration. And you raise yours not by trying harder, but by subtracting noise. The need to be like, the addiction to reaction, the habit of over-explaining, the fear of misunderstanding, the flinch in your nervous system. When someone challenges you, you clear all of it. And what remains is presence that no one can look away from. So stop chasing influence. Become the man who carries it without needing to say a word. Speak less. Move slow. Mean everything. And let the world catch up to the rhythm you no longer negotiate. Manipulation without shame. You won't lie. You won't pretend. You'll move with eyes open. You've been manipulating people your whole life. Not because you're evil. Not because you're a liar. Because you're human. Because manipulation, real manipulation, isn't a tactic. It's a survival instinct. You manipulated when you smiled to avoid tension. When you said yes but meant no. When you changed your voice to sound softer. When you acted less intense so people wouldn't feel uncomfortable. When you stayed silent so someone would feel guilty. When you complimented someone you didn't respect just to keep the peace. That wasn't authenticity. That was influence. Unconscious. Reactive. Unguided. But still real. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You've been calling these moves being nice, being sensitive, being chill, being respectful. But they were strategies, designed to protect, to guide, to survive. And now, you stop doing them by accident. You start doing them on purpose. The problem isn't manipulation. The problem is shame. You were taught that influence is dirty, that control is abusive, that shaping people's perceptions is wrong. But guess what? Everyone's doing it. All the time. With every tone, word, silence, posture, pause. The only question is, are you doing it with clarity or with fear? Machiavelli wasn't ashamed. He didn't teach men to hide their intelligence behind humility. He taught them to use it, to see reality for what it is, not what it should be. He knew people follow signals, not sermons. Emotion, not explanation. Frame, not fact. You already know this. You felt it. In rooms where you stayed quiet and got ignored. In moments where you told the truth and it changed nothing. In relationships where being honest only got you manipulated. Because clarity without strategy is not power. It's just confession. This is where the shift happens. You stop asking, is this manipulative? You start asking, is this conscious? Is this clean? Is this aligned with what I'm choosing to create? Because the man who manipulates with shame creates confusion. But the man who influences with clarity creates direction. And people feel the difference. You don't need to lie. You don't need to deceive. You don't need to fake anything. You need to start owning the fact that communication is never neutral. Every message you send, with your face, voice, body, timing, shapes the other person. The question is, will you use that to reinforce your clarity, or will you keep using it to be safe? Here's the quiet truth most won't admit. Sometimes love manipulates. Sometimes empathy manipulates. Sometimes wisdom manipulates. It's not wrong. It's human. It becomes wrong when you deny it. When you pretend you're just being honest, while secretly hoping someone changes. When you act like you don't care, just to get someone to chase you. When you call your silence boundaries, but it's actually punishment. That's not power. That's fear wearing a mask. So we clean it up. Not by rejecting manipulation. By mastering it. We start using it as intention. To calm someone in conflict, to guide someone toward their own power, to set a tone that opens possibility, to pull energy back when it's being misused, to lead, softly. Without apology, this is influence without shame. It's not cold. It's not fake. It's choice. And you know what happens when you stop being ashamed? People trust you more. Because you're not hiding behind performance. You're not signaling confusion. You're not creating friction through emotional leakage. You're grounded. Simple. Clear. You say what you mean, and you shape the room with how you say it. That's not trickery. That's leadership. Here's the shift in your nervous system. You stop rushing to be understood. You stop collapsing into over-explaining. You stop apologizing. When someone doesn't get it, you start owning silence, pausing with weight. Using fewer words, you become magnetic, not because you're perfect, but because you're anchored. And the man who's anchored doesn't manipulate to survive. He influences to create. Machiavelli never said, be ruthless. He said, be real. Understand people. Understand yourself. Move from awareness, not shame. The moment you stop flinching at the word manipulation is the moment you stop getting manipulated. Because shame is the leash. And now it's cut. Emotional leverage. We stop debating. We start moving people from the inside out. You've been trying to change minds. You've been explaining, reasoning, educating, hoping that if you just deliver the right facts, the right arguments, in the right tone, they'll get it. They won't. Not because they're stupid, because they're human. And humans don't move from logic. They move from emotion. Carl Jung said, "We are not what we think we are what we feel." And Machiavelli, centuries before neuroscience caught up, knew this. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. Not spreadsheets, not clarity, not virtue. Emotion. That's the lever. You've felt this. You've said something completely reasonable and been ignored. You've made the most logical point and been dismissed. You've laid out the facts and still lost the room, the woman, the moment. Because it wasn't about what you said. It was about what you didn't make them feel. Here's the truth. Emotion is the only real currency of influence. It doesn't matter if you're leading a team, navigating a relationship, or commanding a room. If you can't reach their nervous system, you don't move them. And if you don't move them, you're not leading. But here's what most get wrong. They think using emotion means being dramatic. They think emotional leverage means being manipulative. They think it's about yelling, guilt-tripping, crying on cue. It's not. Real emotional leverage is subtle. It's not about expression. It's about activation. You activate something inside them, a memory, a fear, a longing, a desire, and that activation becomes the fuel that moves them toward the decision, the action, the shift. You're not coercing. You're opening a channel. Let's make this real. Want to shift someone? Don't tell them what's right. Make them feel what it costs to stay where they are. Don't tell them what's logical. Make them see the vision they want and what's blocking it. Don't list reasons. Reveal emotional contrast. What they're living versus what they're avoiding, what they say they want versus what they're actually choosing, what they fear versus what they could become. That contrast moves energy. Machiavelli would say, appeal to the heart and you'll gain the body. Because once someone's emotion is engaged, the body follows. The decision follows. And if you can hold that emotional space without flinching, you become undeniable. Not because you tricked them, because you reached past the noise and touched something true. But here's the warning. This power is sharp. It can be abused. It can destroy. So use it with clean hands. Use it when the direction is clear. Use it when the result serves something bigger than your ego. Use it when the alternative is confusion, pain, or wasted time. Because the man who masters emotional leverage without mastering himself becomes a tyrant. But the man who moves from clarity becomes a guide. Let's go deeper. You don't just use emotional leverage with others. You use it with yourself. You move your own decisions by activating your own feeling. You remind yourself not just what you want, but why it matters. Why it hurts to stay stuck. Why it costs to betray your clarity. You feel the pain of inaction, the fire of your standard, the weight of your future waiting on you. And that fire? That's your own leverage. And no one can take it from you once you know how to hold it. Most men try to discipline themselves through shame. It doesn't work, because shame freezes. Emotion moves. Want to act? Feel the tension between who you are and who you're pretending to be. Feel the ache of wasted energy. Feel the gravity of the life you're no longer available for. And then, let that emotion fuel the next move. Not forever. Just enough to break the cycle. That's leverage. So what does this look like in the real world? It looks like asking questions that expose contradiction, without judgment, holding space that lets silence do the pulling, using tone that lands like conviction, not coercion, moving your body with clarity, so your words carry weight, listening for the emotion beneath the reaction, reflecting what they feel. Before telling them what you think, this isn't manipulation. This is presence with precision. When you master emotional leverage, you stop arguing. You stop justifying. You stop raising your voice. Because you understand that energy moves energy, not information. You make people feel safe enough to change, or challenged enough to move, or seen enough to finally drop the act. And when that happens, decisions come easy. Loyalty deepens. Respect grows. Not because they owe you, because you led their nervous system back to truth. This is the most powerful tool you have, and the quietest. You'll never need to use it loudly. You'll never need to weaponize it, because when you own emotional leverage, you stop seeking emotional control. You trust the pull. You trust the impact. You trust the silence that follows your clarity. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous men weren't the most aggressive. They were the most emotionally fluent. The ones who could read the room, the rhythm, the man. The ones who didn't overpower, they redirected. Now that's you. Not perfect, not above feeling, but so clear in your own signal that others can't help but calibrate to it. That's power. That's leverage. And it's yours now. The silent strategist. We stop talking. We start moving from signal. Some men move through the world like a storm. Loud. Constant. Always explaining, always reacting, always visible. But there's another kind of man. He's quiet, still, sometimes mistaken for passive, until the moment he speaks. And when he does, everything stops. Because his silence wasn't absence. It was strategy. Machiavelli never glorified noise. He didn't praise the man who shouts, who boasts, who demands to be seen. He studied men who watched, who waited, who listened to everything and revealed nothing until the moment was right. That's real power. Not what you say, but what you choose not to say. Carl Jung wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." The silent man finds that order. Not by force, by pattern. He sees what others miss because he's not trying to be impressive. He's trying to be accurate, and accuracy comes from quiet. Here's the truth. You've wasted energy trying to prove you're intelligent, trying to fix misunderstandings, trying to speak first, fast, loud, so you wouldn't be forgotten. But what has it bought you? Mostly noise. Mostly people who hear you, but don't feel you. Now, you stop trying to be heard. You start becoming undeniable. Not because you say more, but because when you speak, you do it from center. Silence is not weakness. It's tension. It's presence. It's the space that makes every word land like a strike. Silence is what separates the men who talk from the men who move reality. Because silence sharpens everything. Your observation, your emotional clarity, your rhythm, your control of timing, your understanding of who's leading and who's leaking. And when you move from silence, you don't just speak, you signal. The silent strategist is never surprised. Not because he predicts everything, because he's attuned. He notices how people breathe, where they pause, what they avoid, where the pressure lives in the room, where the power has already shifted, long before it becomes obvious. He doesn't respond with force. He responds with weight, because weight bends perception. You've been told silence is passive, that if you're not speaking, you're being left behind. But here's what Machiavelli knew. He who wishes to be obeyed must know how to command. And command doesn't come from volume. It comes from presence that does not flinch. You don't need to raise your voice when your stillness already sets the tone. You don't need to chase approval when your pause says, "I've already decided." You don't need to convince when your energy says, "This is where I stand." Here's the shift. You move from expression to precision. You no longer talk through every idea. You drop sentences like symbols. You stop flooding conversations with your need to be known. Instead, you lead through questions, through quiet confidence, through eye contact that doesn't look away when tension rises. And when others expect a reaction, you give nothing. That nothing? It makes them fold. The silent strategist is the most dangerous man in the room. Not because he's cruel, because he's not available for confusion. He's already seen through the game, and now he plays it on his terms. He lets others speak first. Let them reveal their frame. Let them collapse into over-explanation. He listens, not to respond, to position. And then with a single line, he moves the room. This is what makes you unforgettable. Not how much you say, but what happens after you speak. Not how fast you think, but how long you hold tension without collapsing. Not how often you lead, but how effortlessly others fall into your orbit when you finally do. You're not trying to dominate. You're anchoring the space, and the room adjusts to you. To live this way, you need discipline. The discipline to stop talking when you feel nervous, breathe through discomfort, let silence speak louder than your insecurity, let others misunderstand you, and not correct them, watch patterns before entering them, and say only what's necessary, but always with full presence. That's how kings move. That's how rooms shift. That's how women feel you without touching. Because silence is felt. Most men can't hold this. They rush to fill the space, rush to be liked, rush to keep peace, connection, comfort. But the strategist? He's at peace in the pause. He leads from the gap. He shapes the field without overreaching. He doesn't perform presence. He is presence. And that's why people follow him. Not because he's loud, because he's clear. Machiavelli didn't ask men to become quiet. He asked them to become dangerous in stillness. To become the kind of man who only speaks when it moves something real. You don't speak to fill silence. You speak to direct signal. And that's what makes you unshakable. You've mastered when to speak, when to hold, and when to let someone walk away without chasing them. Because silence isn't just your strategy. It's your standard. Lead from the shadows. You're not here to impress. You're here to orchestrate. You don't need the spotlight anymore. You don't need the round of applause, the validation, the performance of leadership. You've seen too much. You've moved past that now. Because the man who truly understands power no longer needs to be seen holding it. He leads from the shadows. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And Machiavelli would nod at that. Not because he worshipped solitude, but because he understood this. Influence is clearest where visibility is lowest. The most effective leaders don't command from the front. They shape the direction from underneath. The signal is quiet, but the outcome is decisive. This is your final form. Not the hero, not the loud one, not the man in the arena trying to win the crowd. You are the one who moves the arena itself. No spotlight, no name on the banner. Just pressure, presence, precision. You don't need people to see you. You just need them to move. This is the power behind the power. When you speak last, and your words finalize the decision, when you're not at the center, but everything aligns through your influence, when your presence anchors the room, even when you're not in it, when others lead, but look to you in silence before the moment lands. This isn't weakness. This is range. You don't need to be in front, because your field reaches from behind. Machiavelli understood that politics, war, love, all of it, was shaped not by declarations, but by subtle moves in the dark. Who got access? Who got denied? Who felt pressure and didn't know where it came from? This is the man who doesn't raise his voice but chooses the tempo. Who doesn't fight the battle but decides where and when the battle will happen. This is you now. You don't perform authority. You transmit it, not with titles, not with credentials, not with theatrics, but with the silence that speaks before you enter, the precision that lands after you've left. You move with such clarity that people adjust themselves without needing to be told how. You're not unavailable. You're undeniable. You're not manipulative. You're strategic. You're not above emotion. You simply don't drown in it. And you don't seek attention anymore. Because your attention is the most valuable presence in the room. People feel it. And they move because of it. This is what leadership actually looks like. Making one clear move that shapes 5 outcomes, saying less and being understood more, never asking to be trusted, but always being trusted, watching chaos without panic, giving others power without giving up your center. You're not here to be the loudest. You're here to be the axis that others rotate around without even realizing it. To do this, you've sacrificed a lot. The need to be liked, the addiction to credit, the instinct to rescue, the urge to explain, the safety of being misunderstood. You've traded all of that for something deeper, unmistakable direction. And now you walk with more calm than men who talk 5 times louder. Some won't see you. That's fine. You're not here to be seen. You're here to be felt. And those who feel you, they adjust. Not because they're afraid, because they trust what's behind your quiet. That trust? You built it. By not leaking energy. By not chasing attention. By not forcing outcomes. You earned it by leading yourself first. You no longer play the game. You shape the game board. You don't hold positions. You create positions for others to occupy. You don't reach for control. You walk with such stability that others choose to follow. That's the difference. You're no longer trying to lead. You simply are. This isn't mysticism. It's muscle, built through discipline, loss, mistakes, truth. And now it lives in your bones. You've become the kind of man who can walk through a room and move its structure without needing to stay. Because you've learned that power doesn't come from being visible. It comes from being inevitable. So now you lead, not from the throne, not from the stage, not from the pulpit. You lead from the shadows, with sharp questions, with quiet pressure, with eyes that see 5 steps ahead, with a presence that bends time. No one may ever give you a crown. You don't need one, because you've already built the kingdom inside. The quiet goodbye. You've reached the end, not of the road, but of the noise you used to call clarity. You've walked through silence, power, tension, truth. And now, you no longer need to be told what you are, because you've remembered. You're no longer the man explaining himself, no longer the man asking to be understood, no longer the man leaking energy just to feel connected. You've come back to the center, not the center of attention, the center of yourself. Machiavelli didn't hand you rules. He handed you vision, a way to see clearly in a world built on confusion. A way to move with edge in a world that rewards noise. A way to lead from stillness, from presence, from precision. And you've walked that, fully. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clean. You've dropped what was performative. You've reclaimed what was hidden. You've held power without apology. And now, you walk. Not louder. Not faster. Not with more answers. Just sharper. Clearer. Real. Some people won't get it. They'll call you distant. Too much. Not enough. Hard to read. Too sure. Too clear. Let them. You're not here to convince anymore. You're here to command quietly. You'll move through rooms differently now. You'll say less and be felt more. You'll stop chasing and start drawing. You'll stop asking and start directing. And when someone doesn't match your frequency, you won't argue. You'll leave. With no need for drama. No need for proof. No need to defend a thing. That's what sovereignty feels like. You don't owe the world your vulnerability. You don't owe your clarity to those who haven't earned it. You don't owe your time to dynamics that drain. You owe yourself one thing: to move forward from presence, not pattern. From choice, not performance. From self-leadership, not emotional reaction. And that's what you've practiced here. There's more ahead. New situations, new strategies, new mirrors. But the foundation is set. And when the world starts to pull again, you won't lose yourself this time. Because you've built your edge. Because your signal is strong. Because now, even when you walk alone, you walk with command. So here it is. The quiet goodbye. No fanfare. No final pitch. Just this: watch what's next. Stay in the work. Return to your edge when life gets loud. And if this hits something true, there's more waiting for you on the channel. More fire. More clarity. More of what the world won't give you unless you take it. Thank you for walking this far. I'll see you at the next chapter, where silence begins and strategy lives.